The Drum Candy podcast is brought to you by Drum Factory Direct.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into episode 4 of season 2 of the Drum Candy podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, coming to you from Drum Factory Direct in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This week's guest is Dylan Wissing. Dylan is a Hoboken, New Jersey-based session drummer. He's one of the first people I met that was doing the remote drum recording for artists. His credits go back to Alicia Keys' Girl on Fire. He's also done work for Drake and John Legend. His world's a little bit different than just recording drums for your rock band or, performances from start to finish. He's more in tune to, recreating classic breakbeats to be used in modern production. Slightly different approach. So it's a great conversation. Go to dylanwissing.com. He has some drum loops and samples there you can check out. You also can hire him for your tracks, and he has some really great tutorials. So again, go to dylanwissing.com, and let's get this conversation. This is a fun one. Dylan Wissing.
Mike, how's it going?
Man, tell me what your last session was. You've got such an interesting career as a session drummer. What are you working on lately?
Right now, I'm in the middle of a few different things. I try to, since I change gear a lot, as we've discussed, when certain songs will fit a certain vibe, I'll try to batch them together on the same kit. So on this kit, it's an artist from Lebanon, an artist in the States, and then drum loops for another company. And so it kind of sort of rock vibey ballad drums, maybe a little Coldplay influence. Got kind of the experiment with the woofer kick. I don't know if you can see it there.
Oh yeah,
28-inch in front, mic'd, which I don't know. Sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. Well,
does that end up getting used in the mix, or is it just like fun for a minute to listen to?
If it does, it usually gets a tiny bit, a tiny bit. But it kind of came up because the songs are slow, the tempos are like 72, and the drum parts need to be really sparse, and a single short kick drum at 72 BPM just boom, and there's all the space where I don't want to fill it with a bunch of hi-hat notes or whatever. So just trying to do anything I can to get some sustain from that drum without it being reverb, or just to try to kind of shape the sonics a little bit to give it more like a boom, boom. So, I'm going to send it. I'm going to send my raw tracks. We'll see what the producer and the mix engineer do. But I'm almost always kind of the first guy on the, I'm creating the foundation, and then lots of other stuff goes on top of it, and somebody else is mixing, somebody else is making the final production choices. So I just try to get the best raw tracks and sort of provide whatever the elements I think they're going to need for that session are. And then it's up to them, or they're going to replace all the drums with samples or augment it with samples or,
right.
Whatever, that's all fine too. So,
what is that kit? And then how do you set it up to be rock? Like, what is your rock drum setup, like tuning wise and all that?
This is, I just got one of Ludwig's, the classic maple set series. The last NAMM, when there was a NAMM back in the day, they had, I think Fred Armisen did a clinic on that kit, and that finish. I'm kind of colorblind, so I don't see red very well, and I recognize I'm surrounded by red, but so something about that blue finish, like, oh, I gotta have them. So I got one of those kits, the classic maple set, but with the rounded bearing edges, which I really dig on these drums because they don't have a ton of sustain. And I almost always am muffling toms. I don't want them to go boom, because they're always ringing, and they're always, that ring is always getting captured in every other mic and whatever else. So these just have this great, punch. I've been an Aquarian guy since the early 90s. So it's just, regular texture coated classic clear underneath. I like the Force One batters that, single ply with the ring, not the heavily muffled ones. And then this little, it's a GMS 28 inch. It's like a 10 by 28 super vintage model. I think it's the only 28 inch drum they ever made. And, it's kind of like that old school marching bass drum sound. So, and that thing is just, set up to vibrate low. So for tuning rock, I mean, they're pretty, not too high, not too low. Less muffling than I use. I probably use more muffling than I should in general, but so much of my world is that kind of the 70s break beats and 70s sounding stuff, which, is really the sound of my childhood. So it's a sound I know and love and perfectly happy with the concert tom, muffled. So it just goes.
What's the snare up there? Looks like you got a rag on it. You muffle it with a rag.
Oh yeah. Actually, so that's one of my desert island drums. It's a GMS super vintage, 5.5 by 14 and, with the black gold Duco finish. It's just that drum. It's my number one wood drum. Just that thing. It just always works. It always sounds good, no matter high or low. I have a die-cast tube on top, and it just always sounds great. Actually, that one is used right now for one of the tracks called for like a snares off muffled kind of thing. And at first, I was playing snare drum on the left side, and then the main snare is one of the it's the Ludwig their new Supers 6.5 by 14 brass, which I really dig as well. And so I was doing the part with kind of like the muffled part or the tom with snares off on the left side and the main snare. But then I realized that there was no control if I play it that way. I mean, even if you turn that mic off, it's still bleeding in every other mic. And I wasn't 100% sure they're going to buy the little tom, the muffled tom thing that I'm adding. So I just overdubbed it instead. Which I end up doing that a lot, where I'll try to figure out the part that I think is cool, but then just sort of split it apart as overdubs so that just in case the client doesn't think it's cool, I don't have to go back and try to reset everything up exactly as it was and play the part, but without the cowbell and the crasher or whatever. It really makes life a lot easier for me and clients, I think. I mean, and then if I have to go play it live, which I rarely do, I'm really the live drummer on any of these productions. But every once in a while I have to think, I guess I should figure out how to, add in the cowbell and the left hand floor tom or whatever. So
how interesting. How often, so your first pass, do you do like a basic rhythm track and then you add to it? And then how much of that is directed by the client or up to you to decide?
Usually it's up to me. Usually it's totally up to me. I found that the higher up level of producer I work with, the more tightly they know exactly what they want. Dave Tozer with John Legend. I mean, I've done a few things with him and he knows exactly what I want. This is the vibe. This is the part. This is the everything. And, okay, right. Pull that sound together. Sample recreations with Ken Lewis it has to sound exactly like this record and there can't be any deviation. But then for most of the stuff I do for independent clients, they just, it's up to me. They'll say, I kind of like this, or I kind of like that. I want the drums in here, out there, whatever. But at that point, I'm really left to kind of come up with what it is. And so it's a lot too of, I end up playing a lot of really simple parts on the kit, just, and knowing that there's going to be a shaker, filling in all the 16ths and maybe, a little, some little white noise sound on the ends or the E's and a little cowbell at the end, whatever. It's honestly especially for pop productions too. I mean, I'm almost always overdubbing the crash cymbals or the ride, just because, you know, a lot of people just don't hear them. That, you know, it's not a big sound, and you know, or they want to have real control over that. And I think a lot of it too is so many younger producers today have only worked with samples. You know, you know, if they're hiring me, it might be their first time actually, you know, they've got a budget and now they're going to do a track, and it's the first time, and like, I want to hire a live drummer. It's going to be awesome. And, you know, my raw drum tracks don't hit the same way as a completely quantized, mixed to the nth degree, compressed like mad, you know, transient designer, you know, these samples, which are just huge and perfect. And, you know, at a touch of a button, they all, you know, different kick, different, you know, I don't want to crash, whatever. So learning to sort of think proactively about that stuff. And I do try to gauge, you know, ahead of time what their expectation is, if they've worked with live drums before on this, you know, in a recorded sense. And if they haven't, or it's their first time, it's like, oh boy, this is going to be almost always, if they've never worked live drums before, I just quantize it before I send it, because, you know, that's just what they're used to. And sometimes it feels different. It's what I'm okay, quantize.
Do you also like pre-mix more heavily to make sure everything is smacking?
I try to, but I'm a really lame mixer. I mean, I know I know what you do, and you know, I know what a sidechain is, and I'll get pretty good sounding stuff, but I really don't delve into it that much. It's just I have too many friends that have done it for decades and devoted their lives to mixing and really, 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 really know what they're doing. And I just try to get it to, you know, basically levels, panning, roll off the low end where I need to, maybe a little bit of gating here and there, just to kind of present a clean version of it. There is one plugin that I always print to my tracks, which I can't recommend enough, which is Auto Align by I think it's Sound Radix. And I mean, it's not a cheap plugin. I don't print my effects for the very most part, but that one is great, just in terms of pulling all these mics into phase with each other. And it, you know, even I'll set the phase and make sure everything's in phase, and I do measure my overheads and all that stuff. But it's just amazing what these little tiny micro shifts does to the overall sound. I mean, I'll hear it without the plug-in. I'm like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. Then I hear it with, and it's just, there's so much more air and space around the drums, and, you know, the low end's clearer and everything. So that's something that I just print into my tracks. So they're getting the raw tracks, but I know for a fact that all the kick drum mics are aligned to each other. You know, everything else is aligned to the overheads. And got a couple little tricks that I'll put in a video one of these days, which actually I learned from the founder of the company. So they're not my tricks, but some little things to do with that program that really make a difference. But I can't recommend that one enough.
Is there any other engineering stuff you've had to like modify in order to get that real kind of clean control sample, you know, editable? Like, are you using a lot of room mics? Are you not using any?
I mean, it depends. So, I mean, which sound would you be saying? I guess let's talk reference tracks.
Okay. Well, what you're doing, what you got set up there? Are you still thinking air around the drums, or are you still trying to deliver?
Yeah, definitely for this kind of thing. The next session coming up is more kind of modern, kind of the modern take on disco, you know, Dua Lipa kind of things, and that's much more put up go. So we'll start there for the dead thing. I mean, that's usually going to be no head on the kick drum, or if there is, it's heavily muffled, so that you know, for that really just tight direct sound. The toms may or may not be muffled, or may or may not be single head, kind of depending on the particular track. I haven't set that one up yet. You know, snare drum's definitely going to be tight. Lots of muffling there. I like the snare weights a lot. or, or shop rag or, cut up t-shirts or whatever. I have some pretty ratty t-shirts that don't look very good on camera, but they get the job done. The mics don't care. So, and then, I have, made some gobos.
Oh,
those will go up around. If I really want to make it dead, I'll hang those packing blankets all around the kit to really just kind of build a drum booth around it. And in those kinds of situations, rarely am I using the room mics. But the kind of the great thing about having 24/7 lockout of my own space is I have way too many mics set up all the time. I have 2 sets of overheads at any one time, 3 kick mics, 2 snare mics, everything else, spot mic, ride cymbal mic, trash mic, front of kit mic, room mics there, I have mics out in the hall. And so they're kind of always set up. I'm always tracking all of them and just sort of then picking and choosing based on the session. And that's another thing where I'll try to get a vibe from the client. Some people just want to just give me 4 tracks, the overhead, kick, snare, and maybe one other. And they just don't want to mess with all that other stuff. And then other people like, I want every single mic you have, plus I want more options. Like, okay. So, I think the most I've ever given anyone for, and these are for sample or kind of drum break loops and stuff would be, I think I can do 16, 20, I can do 23 tracks of drums right now.
That's a lot of mics.
It's a lot of mics. It's, and it's way overkill, but I do work for one company. I have a lot of drum loops out there that are anonymous. So lots of companies just don't want to say where their loops come from. So a lot of mine are out there. And, it is funny to, I'll see the ad come from the company like, that's me, but no credit. The check cleared or whatever. So, but, in some of those situations, one guy in particular is making every loop, he makes 5 completely different mixes with one measure of drums. And then kind of from those 5, he'll kind of pick and choose which one fits in which sample pack. So for him to have, the more mics, the merrier, as long as they're actually capturing something different. If it's just a bunch of clean condensers, basically around the kit, all doing the same thing, that doesn't do a whole lot, but more kind of the vibey stuff. The trash mics or the old telephone or I have a talkback, old RCA talkback mic from the 40s, which sounds really cool. Or, a mic in a tin can or, kind of anything to, have these shelves that sometimes ring in the right way. And if I mic those in the right spot, it kind of adds an extra level of just kind of weird, murky.
How do you decide which weird ones to go with in any given session?
You just follow your ear. Some of them, I've had lots of unworkable weird sounds, and sometimes I'll know it immediately, and sometimes I'll know it from the feedback I get. How was that? I was okay. Scratch that one. For example, the you've been to my space. It's an old leather factory in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I could put mics out in the hall, and it sounds huge out there. It's my version of the Headley Grange, Bonham Castle, and it sounds great, but it's so noisy. There's all this ambient noise from the train yard across the way, and then police cars go by, and, depending on the time of day, if there are other people in my suite making noise or playing music or whatever, those mics are suddenly useless. And, which can really suck if I start the session in the morning when no one's out there and it's quiet, and like, oh yeah, this is great. And I get the feedback in the afternoon saying, yeah, this is awesome, but change this. And suddenly, half of my sound is coming from those mics, and, I'll come back to this in the morning, but
interesting.
So it's I guess every space has its challenges, What are you going to do?
Yeah, I used to get a lot of dog barks in mine.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If I don't use those hall mics, I'm completely self-contained in here, and outside noises, I can hear them, with my naked ear, but the mics never pick them up. But my Bonham sounds which I love, and I want to use every time because who doesn't want to sound like Bonham? But
again, how often are they getting used these days? Those big ambient. I mean, there's so many plugins that sound good.
Yeah. I know, it's weird. I don't know. And that's usually I don't know. Occasionally I'll hear the final version of the song, and it sounds great, and it sounds like however they mixed it. Most of the time, the tracks just disappear into the ether, and I don't know. I don't know what they use, or if they use any of it. So
I like you're not like precious about this stuff, because that's just the way it is these days.
Yeah,
you can't control it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I learned that the hard way when I first moved out here almost 20 years ago. I was doing sessions for Ken Lewis, who's a producer who's done a zillion things, and I would have my precious snare drums and tune whatever, and so here's the sound. We go, we need exactly this. So okay, great. Well, I've researched, and it's going to be exactly this snare drum and these head and blah blah blah. And I'd hit it up and no, shit. Okay, the next snare drum, no, that's not it. And it wasn't like, okay, well, if I can give me 2 hours, and I'm going to tweak, and I'm no, we need these now. I need this yesterday. So that's kind of one of the reasons I end up with way too many drums of just shit. I need as many versions of a late 60s Ludwig Supraphonic sound as I can possibly get, because they all sound different, and but it's a really recognizable sound, and lots of people want, but I'll hit my actual late 60s Supraphonic, and no, that's not it. Okay, some other aluminum drum, and so yeah, then end up with too much crap. But
yeah,
that's why we have podcasts like this. So thank you for enabling me.
Well, let's talk about the process of recreating a classic breakbeat, which seems to be so difficult and mysterious.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of people know that sometimes what you hear on a record is a recreation and not the original sample of the beat.
Yeah. I started doing that again with Ken. The first time I did it was, I thought I was going to be on Jay-Z's Black album, and we started doing it and found out an hour into my work that they already got something to do with samples. And I was bummed because the samples didn't sound as good as what I was pretty sure we were going to get, but whatever. So sample recreation it's a process. There's a whole legal backstory to it, which I don't get involved with because I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just a session drummer. But where a record, they sampled an old record for whatever reason, they can't use the actual sample, so we have to recreate it, a brand new recording, but it has to sound and feel exactly like the original. And sometimes they can be really complicated parts. Sometimes they can be really simple. My biggest one was "Girl on Fire" by Alicia Keys. Done some for Drake, Jay-Z, Kanye, Eminem, some other people. And it's usually some obscure kind of crusty gospel record or old breakbeat or something. I did something for T.I., which was like this. I think it was early 80s record, maybe from Taiwan or something, where the drummer had clearly gotten some sort of Octa Plus set and was just doing massive concert tom fills all over the place. And so we had to recreate, a whole bunch of different concert toms, which is why I have simplified it. But there was a stretch where I had I think at one point I had 3 sets of concert tom, totally different sets of concert toms, and trying to get every size available, because those sessions would come in and no, that's the wrong sound. That doesn't sound like, okay, well, I had a Slingerland concert. Now that's not okay. A GMS concert tom. Oh, okay. It can be brutal. So it's it's this process. So you have to just recreate every aspect of the sound. Every aspect, not just the drum and how it was tuned, muffled, how tight the snares were, how hard and where the drummer was hitting the drum, like where on the hi-hat hitting, what the open sound is, the kick, what the room itself sounded like, what all the tape hiss is, that's on the thing. There could be some ambient bleed from other instruments that's in the mics. And you have to recreate every one of those elements. So it's kind of like dissecting a track to its, like, at the subatomic level. Mm-hmm. And it can be a really intensely non-musical experience in the sense of, I'll learn the part at first, like, okay, great. Here I am, I'm trying to be, Clyde Stubblefield or whatever. And I think I'm going to get to do that, but it's like, okay, no, we just need the snare drum. The 2 and 4 sounds like this. And so we have to match exactly the 2 and 4 and get it, the pitch perfect, the rim shot's hitting just the right way. You got to figure out, was it hitting, was the stick in the middle of the drum or was it in the edge of the drum? What kind of rim shot was it? And then, okay, well, then there are all these ghost notes. And then, so that same snare tune for the 2 and 4 doesn't speak the same way for the ghost notes that did in the original. So, you find another drum where that one does speak for the ghost notes better. So, you tune that drum to get exactly the ghost notes. And then, so then I'm kind of like air drumming the parts and then, but kind of air drumming the right hand and playing the ghost notes, but not hitting the 2 and 4. And not hitting the kick and then it all gets assembled in post. And then, we'll add, it'll come out, I think, early next year. It's the biggest project I've ever done with a big company that I can't reveal yet, but we've been intensely involved in recreating a whole bunch of classic samples. And one in particular, I think we added 5 or 6 different kinds of noise to it. Just, my drums plus tape hiss from here, tape hiss from there, the noise from my hallway, just a sample of just the open mics with no drums and just to get that kind of noise. It can be crazy. And then, but digital's by itself is just so clean and everything's pristine. You can hear everything. There's no noise. You hear just exactly what it went into it. And those old break beats, man, that stuff was noisy. Some of those old Sly Stone records, there's, one of the, I've never had to recreate it, but I sort of not dread, but, at one point somebody was asking me about, recreating its, Sing a Simple Song. Mm-hmm. There's a famous breakbeat from it, and the breakbeat is actually there's kind of the breakdown 2/3 of the way through the song, and the breakbeat is actually just the left channel or the right channel. It's one of the 2 channels. So you isolate that channel, and then you separate that, and then you get just the drums. But there's all this crosstalk from the other channel where there are a couple other instruments playing. So you get the breakbeat full on, but then there's all this other just kind of ambient swirling stuff from the horns or the keyboards or something. And we're like, oh man, that would be so much work to recreate. Because, first you got to play like Sly's drummer. I forget who's on that particular track, but he was a badass, whoever it was. And then, and then how we're going to get, that, but you're not actually getting, it's not even the sound of that instrument. It's the reverb from that instrument that's panned to the other side or like cross bleed from the tape itself or who knows what. So it can be excruciating. It really can be just utterly maddening. I kind of love it actually. I just, it's just so fun to dive so deep into these just absolute minutia of sonics, of drum sound, and then try to figure out how you're going to get that, me today in Hoboken, New Jersey.
Do you keep those drums like dialed in once you find it? Like, do not touch that snare. That is the Clyde Stubblefield snare. Don't ever do anything to it.
I used to, and they just, I don't know, the tuning just moves. I don't know if it's, the atmosphere changes and I don't touch it for 2 years and pull it out and it still needs work. Yes, there are a couple that are basically always tuned to Funky Drummer. My late 60s Superphonic, and I have a GMS aluminum as well. That those two get me pretty close. But on the other hand, I've never found the drum. I'm still searching for the actual sound of Clyde's Superphonic. I've been obsessed with the Funky Drummer breakbeat for decades. I've done a bunch of videos on it and tried to recreate that sound. And there's like a honk to the way his snare hits on the Funky Drummer breakbeat that I to this day can't figure out. There's an element that I've tried to find with like paint cans, like this is adding samples on it, or paint cans or a sine wave or snares off or whatever, but I just can't find it. So I don't know, maybe it's just my particular drum doesn't have it in there, or maybe it's the heads I'm using, or maybe it's, I don't know. It's going to be a lifelong challenge. And it's one of those goofy, like, why is that your life's struggle to recreate the Funky Drummer breakbeat? But it's an amazing breakbeat, and it gives me, keeps me off the streets, I guess. Out of trouble.
How much time goes into recreating a 4-bar break?
Oh, 4-bar.
2-bar break, a 1-bar.
Well, okay. Left to my own devices, a couple days on my end, and a couple days of mixing. On a very intense, high budget session on a major label, it's like 24 hours of nonstop, and then 24 to 48 hours of nonstop mixing. Mm-hmm. And those are intense sessions. Well,
I imagine, those are coming in the 11th hour. We couldn't get clearance. This record needs to come out. You have to do this tomorrow.
I did a sample on Kanye's Yeezus, and we did the session was Monday, and the record was on shelves. I think that's Saturday. So, it was an insane turnover. And then, I just had to play drums, and then Ken Lewis had to recreate an entire gospel choir. So I got off easy. Recreate the choir and then mix the sample and then deliver it in time for the records to be on the shelves and that week. So,
high pressure, making me sweat just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's brutal. Again, that's why I end up with way too many drums. Way too many drums.
Yeah, what do you do if you can't get the sound? If you don't have the concert toms, what do you do? Run to every store around? How do you? Yeah,
or just usually it's just rip all the bottom heads off of every time I have and start hitting and see where you get. Especially when I had less stuff. It is just shit. I don't know. Okay, get rid of the bottom. Okay, all the bottom hardware is rattling. Okay, get it off, or tape it up or whatever. It's the head's wrong. Okay, different head. You're throwing piles of heads, and then the muffling's wrong, and the tuning's wrong, and now the mic placement's wrong, and you're hitting it too hard. You're not hitting hard enough. You're it's that times every single detail there is on, and it's always like when you hear the final project, like it's just what's the big deal? What are you bitching about? But to make it sound and feel just like that, it's so much work. I almost always these days, with some very notable exceptions, clients say, hey, I kind of want the vibe of this James Brown record, or I want the vibe of this Dua Lipa record, or this, whatever, they're Coldplay. And having done so much of this stuff, that's easy. Like, oh God, you just need the vibe. Great. We can get it to you in an hour. And it sounds, well, okay, cool. Yeah. That sounds Coldplay-ish or Clyde Stubblefield-ish. It's just when you want it exactly.
That's wild. So If you had to pick one kit and one snare to play for the rest of your life, what would it be? Let's say you don't have to go down the rabbit hole of recreating breakbeats.
You know what? I probably would have answered this differently 10 years ago than I would today. Hurricane Irene hit in 2011. Was it 2011 or 2012? I forget. Anyhow, Hurricane Irene took up my old studio, which is in the basement of part of Hoboken, the part of town that was below sea level. And the sea reclaimed it during Hurricane Irene. So I lost so much gear and, stuff that was really, really precious to me back then. And, it was insured and I got a check and was able to build this room and replace stuff. And a few things I could repair with a lot of work, but it really just like all the stuff that I thought was precious and I could never replace. I found other stuff that's great. So I don't really have an answer to that. Whatever I can afford and whatever's there and, if I can hit it and it sounds good, I'll play it. So that's sort of a half-ass answer, but it's kind of true. I don't care. Whatever, whatever you got, if I lose everything and I have no money and I find a set of drums in the trash, I'll play those. That's fine. Or, you see the guys playing buckets and just scrap metal on the streets of New York, and they're incredible. These amazing grooves, and they're doing stuff with just literally trash. And so I think I love that. I'm really into the craft of drums and drum making as well. I think it's super cool, and I used to mess around with them myself. And I've spent so much time with these instruments. I think anyone making drums and going into the craftsmanship and the detail that it takes to make a great drum, I'm all for it. But my friend Tony from GMS, he and I were talking about this one time. I played their drums since the early 90s. He was just saying, I was saying, well, what about shell or, plies or how many, it's a drum, you hit it, sounds good, you play it. It doesn't, tune it so it does. And if that doesn't work, get a different drum. So that's kind of a lame answer and a non-gear answer. But snare drums, actually that GMS Maple is the super vintage. That's one, a Ludwig Acrolite, really, what more do you need? At the end of the day, you can do almost anything with that. I'm from Indiana originally, and my great grandfather was a circus drummer. He played in the circus and vaudeville and was a songwriter back in the teens through about the early 50s. And I don't have any of his drums, but I have pictures of he and his band on stage in Vincennes, Indiana, and he's clearly playing a Leedy kit. So, so it would have been the 20s Leedy when they were made in Indianapolis, and they're the biggest brand in the world. So I have a couple old 20s Leedy snare drums that they weren't his, but they're highly sentimental. So one of their engraved brass models, which is pretty cool. It doesn't sound incredible, but it's so beautiful that whatever. So I'd play the Acrolite, keep the Leedy because it looks cool.
Good answer. I dig that. What are some of your all-time favorite recorded drum sounds?
Let's see. Funky Drummer Break, 100%. For me, it's a lot of the same. Everyone's touchstone. Well, not everyone's, but Funky Drummer, When the Levee Breaks. Levon sounds on those early band records. They're so fat and so dry. Those are great sounds. Ringo stuff, absolutely love. I was really into Hendrix when I was a kid. My parents had their records, they bought them when they came out, and I then proceeded to wear them out and scratch them up and put peanut butter on them as a kid. There's on Access Bolt of Love, there's a Tom hit somewhere. it's the greatest sounding rack tom. I got to remember what track that was, but it's the perfect. It sounds like a 13-inch rack tom, just perfectly tuned. Just go boom. It's huge. So that sound always stuck with me. And then it's not one particular recorded sound, but there were 3 records that were really, really influential for me when they came out, and still are. Late 80s, early 90s was Tribe Called Quest, Low End Theory, De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising, and then Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. And I mean, I can also spend the rest of my life dissecting those drum sounds, where they just sampled the funkiest stuff from the widest array of sources back when I don't even know if you could make a record like that now, just because of the legal issues involved with clearing all those samples. But just hearing all of those drum breaks in one place on each of these 3 records, that was really influential for me. And I think those 3 records, probably more than anything, are kind of still guiding what I'm doing today. Mm-hmm. Each one of those was sampled and then played on an MPC and to create these songs, but just diving back into the source material for all those sounds. It's kind of this never ending well of inspiration for me. The only drag now is Spotify knows this, and Spotify, no matter what I listen to on Spotify, they always lead me back to some early 70s funk soul record, which I love. And stepping into tomorrow, I hear that record shows up in anytime on Spotify, now we just know you're going to like this. And I do, but I know there's more music out there. So, algorithms, man.
Wow. So yeah, that really did set the template then for what you've been doing for the past decade or more.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So during that time when those records came out, then I was in a band called Johnny Sacco that it was, indie band, toured around the country endlessly, slept on a lot of concrete floors, did a lot of shows, and, was trying to do those sounds, but not really having any idea how to get them. And it was only moving out to the East Coast and starting to work with Ken and then the internet suddenly became more of a source of information, being able to start to figure more of that stuff out. I mean, I've been reading Modern Drummer magazine since I was a kid and kind of poring over what everyone's saying, but it's one thing to see it in print. I used a 5x14 Superphonic. It's another thing to actually get one and then tune it, and find a vintage head, find a old head from 1969 that is in good enough shape to put it on and understand how that responds on the drum versus, a modern pre-muffled thick head set up for arena work. Mm. So, yeah.
You mentioned the slide track you haven't yet do, and you've mentioned that you're still chasing the funky drummer. Is there another classic break or sound that you've yet to tackle?
Wow, there's a zillion.
Is there one that has been elusive?
I mean, the Amen break is always a classic. That ride cymbal on the Amen break. So the cymbal that sounds the closest to me, I keep looking for the Amen break. Basically for me, I want to find, the perfect funky drum snare, the Amen ride, the hats. Not really sure yet. They're, just thin, dark, crisp, with that kind of papery or that sort of buttery open sound as opposed to the hard sound. But yeah, the Amen ride, and the one that I have that's the absolute closest, when my son was maybe 1 or 2, I was at a rehearsal in the city. I got a call from my wife. She said, "Hey, I'm taking our son home in the stroller. It's raining. And so I can't stop. And I have nowhere to carry these, but somebody's throwing away cymbals. They're in the trash. So I'm hiding them for you, at this location. So I ran over and found it. It was two cracked cymbals, but one was it was a 50s 18-inch like heavy band cymbal or something. And it had, a big keyhole in it, and it's a cymbal worth $50 on eBay if you can find a buyer. It's kind of ugly sounding, but it kind of has, it sort of sounds like that Amen ride. So when I'm going for that side kind of sound, I'll use that maybe sometimes with a little sizzle on it, or, like a little rivet or a chain or whatever. And, but I don't have it exactly. So, trying to find these sounds that I can just for the rest of my life, like pull this, oh my God, that's the funky drummer snare. And I don't know why I have these guiding principles. Cause the reality is most of my work is not doing that. It's, somebody's got a song and they want drums that sound good. They don't want a sample. They want new drums. So, I have to have lots of other drums that, just sound good as drums.
Let's talk about cymbals.
Yeah.
I think it's an often overlooked but crucial part of recording. Like, how do you pick cymbals for session work versus gigging? Sure.
I picked them as thin and dark as possible for starters. Those, the 80s and 90s sound of one of my teachers growing up was Kenny Aronoff, who, just nobody hits it harder than Kenny, like 19-inch rock crashes in the studio, the Z power ride and all that stuff. And those cymbals are so cutting and they work brilliantly for Kenny. And, if he's recording a massive room and it's perfect. I'm recording in a room that's about 20 by 20 with 9-foot ceilings. And man, did those sounds not work. They just take over absolutely everything. So, and truth be told, I don't like hi-hats that cut through everything, for example. That is not a sound, like really bright crash cymbals, really bright pingy rides. It's just not a sound that it just kind of gets grating on my ear pretty quickly. Whether I'm playing them or somebody else. And, you see somebody's iPhone recording of a show and like the number one thing you hear is the hi-hat cutting through, louder than the vocals. And I just don't like that sound because I'd rather hear the song. So, yeah. So I've been with Sabian since, again, the early 90s. And their complex thin line, the HHX complex, those I've been looking for those cymbals for since the early 90s. I love that line and have a whole bunch of them, and I have more on order. So that for me kind of took care of what I've been looking for. I had a long stretch spent as a jazz drummer back in the 80s and early 90s. So, and back then everyone was trying to find the perfect, well, still are, the perfect Turkish K. And I actually had a couple of them when, in the 80s, you could find them, 80s and 90s, and get them for like $50 at the pawn shop when nobody knew what they were. And for whatever reason, I didn't keep them. I kind of wish I had, because, those are now $2,000 cymbals. But so kind of in the back of my head, that's always what I want. That's a sound that's kind of imprinted in my head that I want, that doesn't always necessarily work for, louder stuff today, but that kind of vibe, or the Mel Lewis vibe, those, I'm still trying to find the perfect cymbals for that. Basically, like the Mel Lewis cymbals for singer-songwriter gigs, like the 19-inch crash ride and the 21-inch crash ride. And those are the only two cymbals I need. So I'm getting closer. I still just need that left side crash ride. I'll find it eventually. But yeah, but like I was saying too, here, a lot of the times I really am just overdubbing crash cymbals. So it's, and in that situation, some of the thicker stuff works better. If like I have some older kind of heavier crash cymbals that really have, they have this incredible roar, and it's great if that's the only thing you're recording and you can get this amazing sound and hit it as hard as you want. And then, pull the track completely down if it's obnoxious. But aside from that, like those heavier cymbals, if I'm trying to hit them lightly to not overpower the track, they sound awful. You know what I mean? Right. They just you got to hit them hard to actually get them moving, and then they take over the entire sound. Like the hall mics. If I play my cymbals really lightly, and sometimes lighter than I even think I should, they're still plenty present out there. And they're picked up everywhere. So, that's kind of just trying to find those dark light cymbals that really respond to barely tapping them. Mm-hmm. So I can hit the drums hard and then just kind of lightly tap the cymbals, and they make that sound, and then, but without overpowering everything else.
Are you combining two hi-hat tops, or are you using like a stock pair?
Depends on the track. Everything depends on the track. I use a lot of stock stuff. The Sabians, those artisan light hats, the 15-inch hats are gorgeous. I mean, those are the hats that I just are in my cymbal bag for live shows when live shows. I used to play, before COVID, I was playing 2 to 4 nights every single week, and now I barely touch that stuff. And trying to figure out if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. Do you want to go back out? Yeah. That's the question I ask myself.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, so my son's 11, and his entire life I was gone every single weekend. I mean, every single weekend. I'm not gone. I stopped touring when he was born, but playing shows in the tri-state area. COVID hit, and looks like I'm home on, let's watch every Marvel movie, one every Saturday. And like, this is kind of fun. And he kind of likes it, and I kind of like it, and whatever. But then, play a show with other live living human beings making music at the same time. Like, this is cool. This is do more of this too. So what the answer is.
What about stick selection? Do you nerd out on that, or is it just use your 5As or whatever? I was searching for that stick forever, and now so basically I play innovative percussion, and I first got their vintage 5AB. I'm like, oh my God, this is the perfect stick for me forever. I mean, it does everything I want. Absolutely. It's the right size, the right line, blah, blah, blah. And then that's all I use. And then I tried their LAX studio stick. Like, oh my God, this is the perfect stick. And it does everything for me. So I'll use that pair, and pairs last me forever. Cause I'm just not playing that hard. And they eventually, after several months, I kind of worn a little too thin. Okay. New pair. So then I go back and pick up the 5AB, and like, oh, this is the perfect stick. No. So that's kind of where I'm stuck. It's the 5AB. I guess it's the 5AB for me from Innovative. That's a great stick. On the sample recreation side, however, trying to get, let's say, and this actually did come up recently, the MN break, trying to get that ride sound. So, I'd take 4 different ride cymbals that I thought were pretty close, put it up A-B with the track, and then my cymbal. And then I'd have 20 different sticks just lined up on a music stand, one after the other. So I can, and all different, every different kind of stick I can think of. And, and just, okay, cymbal 1, stick 1, cymbal 2, stick 19, and just go through. And I have done, it's whatever that comment, like 80 cymbal hits. I mean, it's insane. It's really insane. But, at the end of the day, you get the weird 7A bamboo stick on the 18-inch cymbal from the trash. That sounds good.
you know, and then, okay, well, all right, now we had test sizzles, and then, which mic captures the right frequency, and, and it's all to just go ding, ding, tap, tap, tap. And okay, there's our sample on one measure of, 1.2 seconds worth of music.
Man, will you go into great detail into the Funky Drummer Break on your website? What is the website again?
The website is creatingthesound.com. Yeah. So, I've been doing this for on and off for 15 years, and I don't do it that often, but when I do it, usually there's a big budget involved, and usually it becomes a big record, and it's a big deal in my life. So, I've developed all these just strategies to deal with these things when they show up. So, I might as well teach it. It's not, none of it's, there are no secrets. I mean, it's just, it's, you hit things with sticks till it sounds right, and, tweak some variables. So, my production partner, Cooper Anderson, he and I actually came up through, with Ken Lewis. So, we met back in the mid 2000s, and, Cooper was Ken's assistant at the time when I was doing a bunch of session work for him. And Cooper now has he has the studio down the hall for me. So, he and I were talking about this. Well, we'll teach it, and, we'll throw up a couple cameras and, show the thing and offer a course. And I mean, we were filming my drum course for 2 weeks. Just and part of that's okay. The lighting's not right. We got to, kind of the film production stuff. But it was seriously 2 weeks of just my assistant Steven and I in here, like, okay, let's go through, 5 different snare drums and see which one sounds closest. And then I took the raw tracks over to Cooper's place, and he would mix them while we were filming. And I think we probably had 24 hours in mixing easily. And, but our goal was to actually just document, here's what this process is. And the videos are definitely not for everyone. I mean, they're probably for very, very few people. You got to really be into this stuff and really want to nerd out. Cause it's like 6 hours worth of condensed, okay, here's every single step of the way and every sound to get from, this empty room to our Funky Drummer recreation, which I think is pretty close. Both of us now think, shit, here's what I would change. If we do this again, I'll do this and that differently. But that's always going to happen. So, yeah. So if anybody is insane enough to want to learn how to do this stuff, we'll teach you.
You have a few free ones on there too. I'm trying.
There's a bunch of free ones. Yeah. Most of our stuff is free. The ones we're spending 2 weeks filming my part and 24 hours mixing his part, we have to charge. But we do all sorts of stuff. Just this week on YouTube, we recreated the Aaron Comas, the Spin Doctors, Two Princes sound, and got pretty close. And like Steve Jordan Vultures, and we definitely nerd out on this stuff. So I'll show how here's the drum I'm using and my nerdy details, and then Cooper will show how he's mixing it, basically taking my raw tracks. And one of the things that, as we were talking earlier, I'm engineering the stuff, mixing it, sending it out to the world. I don't know what happens to it. And so part of what I wanted to do with Cooper was just show me what happens. How do you get, from my raw drum tracks to the finished mix that's on the record? What are the steps? And so Cooper has been, into, okay, sure. Here's what we do. You gotta do all these different things, and it's different for every track because it all depends on what the sound you're going for is. I'm learning a lot from it. One of the things I'm learning too is my monitoring situation needs to get better because, I'm like most other drummers, trying to learn how to engineer by myself in my own room. And and setting up the space so you actually are getting accurate information from your monitors, and you actually know what your low end's doing, what the mid range is doing, all that stuff really counts for a lot. So I was actually just reviewing a rough mix I sent yesterday to a client. I'm like, I was listening at home on headphones, like, oh man, my mix did not translate how it felt, on my speakers, which is right there, and the subwoofer in this room. Like, oh man, this sounds awesome. Pull it up on home, like, ooh, not as awesome as I thought it sounded. So
I love it.
It never ends.
Well, I'm looking at your site now. It's creatingthesound.com. Anyone listening that wants to get the free stuff, there is drum recording for beginners. There is acoustic treatment shootout. There is a studio acoustic overhaul. There is how to play the funky drummer. I mean, there's a lot.
There's a lot there.
Beat making with the iPad, mixing live drums in James Brown style, Lynn Collins style, 60s soul, 70s Philly soul. So there's a lot of free stuff there. So go check it out.
There's a bunch of more of that on our YouTube page as well. So.
And what is it, creating the sound on YouTube as well?
Yeah.
Sweet, dude. I mean, last question. What was your first snare drum?
My first snare drum, it was my parents. Let's see, my first snare drum were pots and pans as a baby with wooden spoons in the kitchen. But my first actual drum was I actually, my parents were friends with Kenny Aronoff, and I grew up in Bloomington, Indiana. My parents met when I was in, I think, 6th grade, and I just started school band on the drums, playing, snare drum in school band. And I wanted to get into drum set. Kenny said, yeah, you got to get your kid a drum set. So we went to Smith Holden Music in Bloomington, Indiana. And they bought it was a 60s set. It was, I think in retrospect, probably a Pearl set. 12, 14, 20 with I think it was a 6-lug wooden snare. I had no idea at the time. All I know, I'm almost sure it was 6-lug now because I could never get it to be anything but really low and ratty. And basically I wanted to have the big early 80s heavy metal sounds that I was hearing on the radio. And I couldn't get them from my little kit.
The Rick Allen Pyromedia sound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, precisely. I don't know if you saw, but that kit was just for sale on Reverb. It might still be there. You know the one. It was the kind of like chrome finish.
Oh yeah,
the power toms. Yeah, that exact kit is $20,000, $10,000.
Does it come with the Union Jack shorts? That's what I want to know.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, I was gonna save my allowance, see where if I could find some loose change in the sofa. Pick up I saw that kit a zillion times, with the Ludwig ad, the full page ad with all the smoke and lights, and like, oh my God, that's, so my little jazz set. I ended up stripping it. It was, I think it was red pearl that had been spray painted black when I got it. And then I stripped it down to natural wood and stained it when I went into more of a jazz direction. And I used that kit up until college. And, so that snare drum was unremarkable, but the kit itself was kind of cool. It had a vibe, and Smith Holden Music, I ended up teaching there. Sean Pelton was teaching there for a little while. Another one of my teachers, Eric Deggans, who is not, I don't think he's well known in the drum world, but he's NPR's chief media critic and is all over the world on TV, usually every day. But he was a great drummer, and I got really into his sound, and he's also a left-handed drummer. I'm left-handed as well, although he went full lefty, which I can't do because I'm left-handed but right-footed. Anyhow, yeah, Smith Holden Music. It's high-end luxury apartments in downtown Bloomington, but it was a great place.
That's the progression from art to non.
Yeah. Well, I think this room is slated to become to be knocked down and turned into high-rise luxury condominiums too soon. So
yikes. Well, yeah, hopefully not too soon.
Well, I think I'll be given a new space, but I'm gonna have to build a proper room. And I've been geeking out on studio acoustics and soundproofing techniques lately. So that's going to be a big part of my future. Which gets a whole lot more expensive than a couple little, snare drums.
You can move to Pittsburgh and have acres of land. Come on over.
That's, I mean, yeah, I don't go to attended sessions anymore. My clients couldn't kill us where I am. Might have a tough sell with my family, but we'll see.
All right. Thank you for coming on the show. It was a lot of fun. And I've got lots of research back through. So a lot to dig into. Thank you.
Of course. Great to talk to you.
All right, there you have it. That's it for this week's episode with Dylan Wissing. Again, go to DylanWissing.com. That is DylanWissing.com. Check out what he's got there. He's got some free tutorials there on recording and how to get different sounds, some mixing, all the stuff for free. You can also subscribe to his Getting the Sound website, all on DylanWissing.com. Thank you for listening. Please give us a review over on iTunes. 5-star rating would be much appreciated. And we will see you next week.